Yes, we live in interesting times as far as RISC OS is concerned, as I'm sure most of you will agree. There's a lot of possibilities and options. Most of you may have seen on our stand, but I will show you briefly. Can't connect up because by definition this one it hasn't got an output to to a projector. But basically, this is what we refer to as a LaPi, as in it's a laptop and it's a Pi. Well, it's a laptop in some senses of the word, not in the total, in all of them, we must admit. But basically, the laptop, in case you don't know, it was designed by Motorola, and you put your smartphone into here, and it basically gave you a display and a keyboard. So in here, that's all there is. There's no computer, a display, a keyboard, and a USB hub and a battery. And there is battery charging circuitry and that. And you just press a button on the front here, and it lights up. Thing that shows basically how many 4 or 5 LEDs to tell you how full the battery is. But by various people have worked out various ways of connecting a Raspberry Pi to it. A lot of it involving sort of shaving plugs to get them to fit, or to reduce the size, cutting wires on things. But if you've got a Mark II Raspberry Pi and the right cables, and we've actually a mixture of sourced the right cables and had custom made for us cables, you can do the basics of it with just those 2 wires. So one of these is basically just an HDMI, well, it's an extension cable followed by an adapter to take you to the standard HDMI input, or the USB cable, which acts as your communication for your keyboard and mouse and the hub that's in here, but it also powers the Pi, so that's why it needs to be a Mark II. And the only problem is there's no way of turning the power off. So we've actually had, well, it's a bedside light type switch fitted in line, so that will turn the power off for you. There are a couple of limitations to it. Various reasons to do with the fact of it being so yes, it fits, can fit fairly neatly like that, and from here I can't see any of the gubbins behind. It can be mains powered to charge just in there, and then there's 2 USB ports there, so you can connect up a phone, a mouse, or you could put into there something like a pen drive, and we've got something called nano pen drives that look like the sort of dongle that you tend to have for a little keyboard, tiny little things that stick out, and you can actually get SSD USB pens. They're actually like a fat USB pen, well, sort of wide-ish. Unfortunately, we've ordered some, but they didn't arrive in time. But because SSD is where it is aimed at use for sort of like random access filing, whereas an ordinary USB pen is really not aimed at that, and is therefore a bit slow, and it has a limited life doing that. But you can do that. The other thing that you can do is add one of these, which is sometimes referred to as a nano or a mini router, which basically it's a wireless receiver, goes into the Raspberry Pi's network socket, and it actually just uses the USB just to power it. That's all it's there for. It does need to be set, we've set it up so like in the shop, it talks to our wireless router, it knows about the password and the name of the network, and therefore that will work, connect up and work. Unfortunately, you can't just say, well, I'll pack this up in a little bag, take it down to the nearest cafe, and they've got Wi-Fi. You won't be able to use it because you do need to be able to, with Wi-Fi, input, choose your network, enter the password. That is something that, of course, for RISC OS, being the ability to have that sort of wireless networking on RISC OS is something we all want. I suspect it will happen when one of the few people, and there are not many of them, I think, with the technical skills to do that, decide they get the itch to do that thing, because it's a lot of work, I'm sure. It's not a simple thing to do. But that is the basics of LePi. We are hoping to even offer well, Le Panda, which is basically you put one of the Panda boards in its little metal case. Now it will need to be powered by the mains, but the little metal case, actually I should have brought it with me, but we've got it on the stand, I can show it if anyone that's interested, is not that much, well, twice the size of the Raspberry Pi sort of case, a little bit deeper, but it basically would do the same job. We haven't managed to sort out an MDF, because the thing is, it really is quite, it's 1360 by 768, and it does give you a really nice display. That's sort of those two. Then basically what we've got is the Panda Row and the Raspberry Row, which is basically a Panda, RISC OS in an ITX case, and Raspberry Row, a Raspberry Pi running RISC OS in an ITX case. What we've had done is, excuse me, just take a slap of this. We've had special brackets made for us that basically, this is the one for a Panda. So a Panda board gets bolted on there, and unfortunately on a Panda board, most of the ports come to their back, and they're there. We have also actually added, you may notice a couple of extra holes. We've added that one there, which basically, so if you did want to try and route to the RS232, which Panda board does have, although there isn't RISC OS support yet for it, or anything else that uses that sort of 9-way D-type or 15-way high-density type socket, they could mount it there properly, and or other cables that maybe won't go through the holes, but hopefully if they'll fit through that slot there, then with a grommet there, they'll be able to get cables in and out of it. Which, yes, I might as well show then basically what we've also done is for the Raspberry Pi, we've done two versions of it. One of it where the Raspberry Pi sits like that, with the SD card sitting on the outside, because once it's if you went in the other orientation, you really can't change the SD card easily. If you're in a situation where you want to try swapping cards, putting in Debian, swapping different versions of RISC OS on the card, actual card, then that's the version you would need. And we bring out two USB, we put internal hub, so we were able to bring out two USB, the HDMI, 1-volt composite, sound, and the Ethernet on a standard socket there. And then so this is just the same, but where the Pi, that is where the HDMI output of the Pi goes, so it fits there, HDMI goes to there, and with the two networks, 9-way D-type and the other standard ones. So, and we were basically various bushes and that in there. These ones are, if you have a Mark 1, you can actually, we've got special mounting brackets, nylon. They're basically actually modified double glazing clips that fit into there and there and there and hold it really nicely, and it does the job. And this one does it in the other orientation, holds it. Or, yes, there are now the two smaller holes to bolt it in place using the two new mounting points they've got. And we supply the appropriate, we can supply and or we use, when we make them up, the appropriate feet. Yes, sourcing things like the right size feet, the right size spacers, the right size nuts and bolts, has meant that things like it, there are 20 different sort of like components. I counted up in the Raspberry Row, and that's just counting the fact of, say, like the Ethernet extension cable being one, but we actually have to buy in the plug and make it up ourselves, because no one seems to make those as a standard item. So we've got, and in actual fact, I'm not quite sure if, when we count individual things like that, no two items have we found from the same supplier. often it's not even been price that we've had to move to another supplier for, but to get all the relevant components, it's a bit of a nightmare in some ways, and it's made it a little bit simpler with the Mark II, because of the way that you can power the Raspberry is a little bit easier. So, but the other thing is, we thought, right, if we're going to put it in a case, we want it to be like a proper computer. So we wanted things like the power button to work, and not because an normal power supply, power case, an ATX case, the front button is momentary. You push, it makes a contact, you release, the contact's gone. Whereas if you want to turn the power supply on in an ATX case, the power supply basically needs on one of the pins that on the 20-way connector needs to be earthed permanently, for all the time. It needs to be on. So motherboards have some logic on them that does that, and that's actually, we thought, oh, we'll emulate that with a couple of transistors. And after talking to various people that know more about it in electronic design than we do, they realised it's not quite as simple as that, especially as we thought, well, we'd really like it to be able to say that you could then turn it off by holding in for X length of time, 3 or 4 seconds, like you can on a PC. And I mentioned this to someone, and this is where one of the things that's good news. Mentioned to someone, and they said, oh, what you want is a pick on there, and the controller will wear a pick, and that will do the job. And I said, well, where can I get someone to design that? It'll cost far too much money. And he goes, I'll do it for you. So now this is actually about Adrian Mully, who may not remember the name, but basically he originally wrote Photodesk. We found someone else who's now maintaining it, but he is the original author of Photodesk. And he hadn't been involved on RISC OS scene for over 10 years. But he bought himself a Pi, he's speaking to us about one thing and another, and he's now getting back into RISC OS. And some of the work that he's actually, the little demo program, test program that we've got for demonstrating some of the facilities of this, he wrote. So he's getting back into it, which is great, good news to get more developers back working on RISC OS. So basically, we took our real-time clock module, which also normally has a temperature sensor on it, and we expanded it. So this board now has the real-time clock, temperature sensor, a PIC on board, a voltage regulator, and a transistor, and then various connections to here, which basically, this would normally, one of these is, I can't remember which way, but this is the power button, and it is now set up so that the PIC is powered all the time via the standby voltage on the standard ATX power supply, which is what all PCs do for their power control. And it then senses for this switch, and either, in actual fact, you can fit a latching switch or a momentary switch, and it will basically cause it to be turned on. Also means that we can actually have soft power off, like on the Ionics. That has also been implemented, and we've also done a reset. Now, some of for Mark, when we started designing, of course, we didn't know that the Mark II sort of apart from Raspberry Pi were going to have a reset button. But so basically, what we've done is we've managed to work out, even though it's only an 8-pin PIC, work out a way of actually using, I forget which particular pin, but it's one of the pins that's normally used for another purpose. Oh yes, the pin that is actually controlling the power supply. If you momentarily short it with the reset, it manages to sort of understand that and not to cause the power supply to knows it's not going to be telling it to shut down, and will basically turns the power supply off for 1 second and then turns it back on again. And apparently ATX power supplies normally only hold their power for about a tenth of a second, so it effectively does a reset by doing a short power cycle. We also connected up sort of basically just the standard 5-volt line. It's the only part of the board that runs on sort of the Raspberry Pi's 5-volt line, but just so you have a power switch, we decided you would use the 5-volt, so it had the same, the standard luminosity. But we realised also, well, you could maybe do some other things with this. And actually, one of the things that's missing on sometimes when you put say that in a case is a filing system activity light. Now, at work, if I suddenly see, oh, machine's gone, it's sort of got an hourglass, oh, what's it doing? Is it doing a lot of hard disk activity? Oh, the hard drive light is not going on, or is on, I know that. So I like to be able to see if the hard drive activity light is on. So basically what we've done is we've implemented that as well. And at the same time, when we were discussing this, because this is, in actual fact, when we started talking about hard drive activity and that, I realised that the person to possibly talk to, the best person to talk to would be Rick Murray, who's written a thing called Beagle LED. And he got quite interested in that and said, oh yeah, I'll try and do some software for that. And also talking in liaison with Ben Avison of Rule, Ben turned around and said, oh, it would really be quite nice if you could have a red for write and a green for read on your filing system. And we thought, well, we got a spare pin on the PIC. Yes, so it has been implemented. As of, Rick sent me at 1:45 the latest software which actually works and basically shows that running, and we can demonstrate that. So basically what we wanted to try is get together sort of the complete hardware to make a Raspberry Pi or a Panda in a case a proper sort of computer. So you don't have cables going all over the place, and it doesn't quite do everything. So we're trying to make that a polished product, quite presentable. There is still, obviously, with the software, the Raspberry Pi is only just getting there, and to some extent that's also true with the Panda, because it's basically we realised, well, if you want ultimate power, then the Panda board is the one to go for, because it is far more powerful than the Raspberry Pi. Not massively, but unless you're going to get into stuff that actually utilises the neon floating point facilities that the Panda has, but hopefully someone will eventually find ways of utilising that for more general purpose usage, or general within the operating system, I mean. So we've actually been talking to Willie Thies, who's did the Panda port for the Panda board port for the for RISC OS, and he is doing the modifications to the operating system that does the power control. If any of you have seen an A9 shutdown, when you do an A9 shutdown, it comes up with options of off, cancel, shut down, and restart. Yes, that's the one. And basically, he is implementing those in the operating system, so it will be able to be in the Raspberry Pi build and in the Panda board build for that. So it's quite interesting that yes, this project involves Adrian Mully doing some basic hardware and some of the low-level stuff. Because obviously it's all controlled, this board, basically being I2C. Because the PIC effectively does I2C. And so all the commands are sent via that on there. So, and Rick's in France, and Willie is in Switzerland or Germany, I can never remember which. So it's a bit of an international project, and I think the PCBs were made in Scotland. So, but yes, the Panda board, that has more grunt, more power. It is a bit more difficult when it comes to monitors with the Panda board. The Raspberry Pi, well, both of them only do digital output, but the Raspberry Pi will work at pretty well any resolution that you can get, and will also work at quite a wide range of refresh rates, and it will output the higher resolutions, 1920 by 1200, at a decent refresh rate. The Beagle board and the Panda board do have problems in that area, so you have to be more careful with the monitor choices on those. Yes, as far as the power control, we also have it. Yes, if you do want to turn it off, just a quick press doesn't turn it off. But sorry,
Shortly.
okay. Hold it in for 2 seconds and it will go off. Basically, all our boards, they come with suitable licenses from Castle for the code, and they're also from RISC OS Limited to sell into their exclusive market, which I believe is what other current vendors also do. One thing, the Emulor for the Raspberry Pi, the price for that has now been set at £18, including VAT. And basically, still no exact date as to when it will appear, but we are taking pre-orders, but we don't want to take people's money yet because we don't have their money when we don't have a date on that. But because that's one of the things when years ago, 2 years ago, people were saying, well, why don't you do CJE do a Beagle board? But we felt that it was until like Emulor was available, with a lot of the average user who just wanted to say, I want to replace my strong arm RISC PC with a more up-to-date computer. Most people needed something that ran on Emulor, that needs Emulor. So it was one of their critical applications that they use. But now that is available, these later boards are, will do the job for most people. The other things, yes, going back to the rotated display, something I was thinking about the Raspberry Pi, I thought, I'm sure it must get a code with rotated display. And lo and behold, it's actually quite simple. You put in your config.txt file, rotate_display equals 1, 2, 3, or well, 0. So it will do 90, 180, or 270. It's quite weird though, looking at some of these displays. When you just turn something, say it's 1200 wide, 1920. At first glance, you think, but that's more than twice as wide as it's high. It's more than twice as high as wide. It just seems at first, it's really weird. And I think people need to get used to it. But there are some things that really having that extra height can be very, very useful. Well, on those displays, and that's why we've got a couple of them on display on the stand, they are actually also 1920 by 1200, which is really quite rare nowadays to get hold of. 1920 by 1080, everyone does, but by 1200, used to be not too difficult to get, but then it became rarer and the price difference between the two was twice the price for those extra few pixels. But no, we've managed to get the pricing down a bit, and we found that these other ones which actually do a rotated display can be very useful. And that's why even one of them we've got has options of picture by picture. You can have two inputs on the screen at the same time. I haven't actually had the time to work out how to do that and what it looks and what modes you have to select, etc. But the rotated displays can be very, very useful. I think for when you're doing desktop troubleshooters, if you could have lovely, nice resolutions side by side, that would be lovely. But often the resolution with most people's eyesight isn't such that you could view 2 A4 pages on a 1920 by 1200 in the normal mode. But another thing, just briefly mentioning CJE and support that we can offer. Because some people seem to think, oh, well, I've got a problem, but I didn't, it's out of warranty, or I didn't buy it from CJE in the first place, but how can I get it sorted? In actual fact, we are quite willing to offer, it is obviously on a commercial basis, paid for, support to anyone. We've had people say, oh, X has happened, how do I get around it? And we can give them telephone support, and we're quite willing to do that to anyone. They're willing to pay us the appropriate money. Yes, certainly on a number of occasions that saved people money, because I know the other option was that saying, oh, well, I'll send it to you, or you come and collect it and sort it out and send it back. And, a 10 minutes call for our phone call cost them, £15, £20 sort of thing, and fixed it, whereas courier both ways and then our labour on top of that would have been Yeah, well, the courier those ways is 30 odd quid, so you're looking at about £50, and yet so it works out cheap. So we're quite willing to do that. Saw something else, but I've forgotten it. In the meantime, sorry, any questions?
So the document that you've got.
Yes.
So that does come with a fixing bracket for the pie on the back, or is it just floating?
This?
Yeah.
Right, okay, there are, no, it has to be free flowing, really, because the physical strength in those connectors is not great. You have to have a flexible connection, I believe. I know a couple of people have worked a way of using and shaving various things and having something that's then a magnetic to try and hold it in place on the back here, but it's only that part that is magnetic, the button, and it just doesn't grip it unless it only gives a very slight grip. So it's impossible, unfortunately, I feel, to actually do anything that actually would mount it up on this. I've seen, yes, things balanced on there directly with cables coming off, but you, I think, will significantly reduce the lifespan of your connector. And from a commercial point of view, there's no way we could give a warranty on something that's stressing the connector so badly, unfortunately. But it's not quite as neat, but it sort of, let's say, you can normally tap it away so you can't actually see it.
So, and equally, I know you said that there's a panel measurements, but
yeah.
If somebody's got, say, an existing Raspberry Pi or Panda,
we basically, that's the other thing, is we know we haven't got them on the website yet because some of them haven't actually, well, we only got the first one of these, sample one, through on Wednesday, and so I haven't had a chance to add it onto the website, but we will be offering all the components, make them available. I don't think, like at the moment, the last I looked, the only new ones of these you could actually get, just go and buy from a commercial outfit, was off Amazon, and they were wanting £177 for this, with obviously the extra bits and pieces, and they had 2 left on Thursday, so they've probably gone now. Because unfortunately yesterday Mitro have stopped making them, but it's, as I say, these were £400 when they sold them as an accessory to the phone. So that was it, £299. It's still a bargain. Cheap.
Can I call an end to that now? Because next time Orpheus should be on shortly. Thank you.